What's good, everyone? Welcome back to Grailbound Gaming. In today's video, I'm going to share my top 5 PS2 games. Not only that, but this is also a response to a video that was done recently by the Mad Belmont, in which he shared his top 5 PS2 games. So I'll provide a link to his video in the description below. Definitely go and check it out. So without further ado, let's get to it. So my number 5 game is NBA Street Volume 2, made by EA Sports Big, and I consider this to be one of the GOAT basketball video games. I normally don't play sports games, but when it came down to this game specifically, it was very over the top with all the different trick shots and moves that you can do because it is street basketball. And what I really like about this game is that it not only combines basketball, but it also combines hip-hop music. And then, you know, if you ever grew up watching like the And1 mixtapes and tuning into the And1 tours, then you're definitely gonna really like this game a lot. So some of the unique things about this game is that you can create your own baller whose purpose is to become a street legend, and you can participate in tournaments not only with other basketball players, but you can even play against and play as like NBA legends such as Michael Jordan or even Kobe Bryant. And this game is really cool because it's really a 3-on-3. You can play up to 4 players through the multiplayer, but it's really cool to be able to go, you know, against each other head to head. And what's so unique about this game is that a few of the courts that you play on or that you can select, I believe there are like 11 or 12 in this game, you can actually go to those courts in real life, like they actually exist. One of them is Rucker Park, which is in New York, and that's one of the courts that's in this game. So I think it's really cool that they decided to take real famous courts and incorporate them into the game. So another cool thing about this game is that when you're on the court and you're playing basketball, there's a lot of commentary by DJ Cucumber Slice. You know, his real name is Babito Garcia, but it's really cool that they were able to get this guy to be able to commentate the game. So, you know, if you end up like messing up, right, if your character like double dribbles or something like that, then, you know, DJ Cucumber Slice, he'll just call it out. So I think it's really cool to have that within a sports game. And yeah, I highly recommend this game to anyone that is not wanting to just play a regular basketball game, but play something that's over the top. Because you know there are definitely elements of this game that are real. Like you can set picks. You know, if you're the point guard coming down the court with your team, you could throw alley-oops to your team members, and you can also do this move called off the heezy, where you bounce the basketball off of someone's head. It's just really unique being able to combine street basketball and professional NBA basketball along with hip hop. So those are the reasons why NBA Street Volume 2 is my number 5 game. All right, next is the number 4 game, and that is Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. This is the 3rd game in the Budokai fighting series on the PS2, and I played 1 and 2, but I particularly like 3 because there's like 40 characters on the roster, probably more than that if you unlock some secret characters. But it's really cool with the fact that even in the story mode, you can play through all the different sagas of Dragon Ball Z and be able to unlock characters. And during the story mode, you can actually travel around the map and collect Dragon Balls and advance the story, stopping at different locations. And doing this allows you to, in a sense, like build up your character stats and to get different abilities, unlock different features from the game. Like, you know, if there's a certain stage or arena that you haven't unlocked yet, I think you can go through story mode to be able to do that. And same thing too with the characters. So one of the main reasons why I really like this game a lot is because of the fighting mechanics, which I feel are some of the best for like an anime fighter. Particularly with Budokai 3, there were a few mechanics that they introduced into the series that weren't available on the previous editions. With the first being, you could like teleport. If your opponent came at you, right, with a kick or a punch or even shot an energy blast across the screen, you'd be able to just teleport behind them and either evade or like continue fighting them. Another cool thing was that you were able to ascend or become airborne whenever you wanted to. The previous games didn't really allow that. Someone had to like basically hit you up into the air. But with this game, you could easily ascend into the air and descend whenever you want to. Another thing too about the fighting mechanics is that you were able to teleport and, you know, in a sense, pinball your opponent through the air across the screen. I thought that was really cool. So if you start a combo on the ground and then the last hit of that combo is you hitting your opponent into the air, you can teleport behind them in midair and basically do this pinball effect where you're hitting your opponent back and forth across the screen. I thought that was really cool. And one of the fondest things that I remember about this game is playing it with one of my older brothers. Him and I would like get together and really go at it. So one of the coolest things is that, say for instance, you and your opponent both fire off a Kamehameha wave or an energy beam at the same time, then all of a sudden you both get into what the game calls a beam struggle, and you have to rotate the analog stick very quickly. Whoever rotates the analog stick slowly ends up losing that little struggle battle and takes the damage. So I thought that was really cool because my brother and I, we always get into beam struggles with one another. And the last thing that I want to highlight about the fighting mechanic of this game is that there's a mode called Dragon Rush Attack that is similar to a rock, paper, scissors type style. So, you know, when you're in Dragon Attack mode, you and your opponent are pressing certain buttons at different periods throughout the Dragon Rush Attack. And if your opponent presses the same button that you do, then, you know, your attack is actually stopped. Like the Dragon Rush pretty much ends. But if not, then the Dragon Rush will continue and allow for further damage. And for some characters, say like Piccolo, once you complete a Dragon Rush attack, it automatically goes into doing a special attack. So if Piccolo was your character and you made it through the Dragon Rush attack, you'd be able to do the special beam cannon at the very end. So with that being said, like this game is just super unique, not only with the large character roster, but just the very unique fighting game mechanics that it offered in the series. And I highly recommend it to anyone. So yeah, Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 is my number 4. Okay, so my number 3 is Final Fantasy X. And this game is actually the very first Final Fantasy game to release on the PS2. And of course it was developed by Squaresoft, but today we know them as Square Enix. And my fond memory of this game is not necessarily playing it, but actually watching it. So when my sisters and I got our PS2 like many years ago, I was probably like 13 when we got our first PS2. My older sister bought this game for herself to play. And I have fond memories of just watching her play the game. Like we take turns, right, playing our games, and when it was her turn, she played Final Fantasy X, and I immediately became captivated with, you know, the different characters in this game, such as Titus, Yuna, Waka, Lulu, Riku, Kamari, and Auron. I became fascinated with all these characters, and the cool thing about Final Fantasy X is that the story really draws you in from the beginning, right? So you're playing as Titus, and Titus is participating in his sport called Blitzball, which is like a water polo type style game. And during a match, you know, the stadium that he's playing in is actually attacked by this like humongous creature, and you know, the stadium falls apart. So the game starts you off in Zanarkand, that's the name of the city, and then eventually you meet Auron, and then you're transported to a future world or alternate world or reality where Zanarkand is actually in ruins. So I thought that was pretty cool that they were able to incorporate some type of time travel within the game. But as far as the game itself, it's very unique because it was one of the last Final Fantasy games that incorporated the turn-based battle system. If you all have played Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. But you know, looking at more of the modern day Final Fantasy games, it's more action RPG like similar to, you know, the Kingdom Hearts games or even Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, right? So the fact that this game had turn-based battle system was amazing. And it allowed you to have 3 characters within your active party. The cool thing is that, you know, you didn't have to complete a battle to trade out your characters. You can actually trade out your characters mid-battle. Another thing that was really cool about this game alone was definitely the graphics and the music. The water effects were very beautiful in this game. And even the music, man, amazing music composed by Nobuo Uematsu. The guy's a genius. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, you know that he's made majority of the music for the franchise. So to see him continue to do that work on this version of Final Fantasy was just bar none. Also too, one of the things that I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about is the religious overtones that were presented in the game. So there was a struggle between, you know, humankind, or, you know, mankind, and this large creature called Sin. And Sin was responsible for the deaths of millions of people, right? Like, whenever Sin showed up, he destroyed villages, leveled them entirely, and those that survived had poor memory. So throughout the game, there's, you know, this presence of, oh, like, Sin is upon us, right? Like, Sin is nearby, and people, you know, would pray to their god called Yemen, right? They would worship Yemen, they would sing to Yemen. It was just really cool to be able to see those like religious overtones within a video game. And it happened to where, you know, Titus and all the other characters I mentioned ended up getting caught up in this battle and going against Sin themselves, to the point where, you know, one of the characters, Yuna, she was considered to be the healer or the white mage of the group. She was a summoner, so she went through a lot of strict training when she was younger, and you know, her purpose was to become a summoner, and the summoner would basically bring about or be in charge of these mystical beasts called Aeons. So in Final Fantasy VIII, we know them as like GFs, but in Final Fantasy X, they're known as Aeons. So whenever a summon happened, you know, the other 2 characters in your party would disperse, and then Yuna would summon the Aeon, and then the Aeon would show up, and then you can literally control the Aeon in battle. I thought that was really cool. So I think they have a similar concept in Final Fantasy 16, but I'm pretty sure the idea had to have stemmed from Final Fantasy 7. So I thought that was really cool with what they did for that. Not only that, but no one else was able to summon Aeons or mystical creatures, right? Like, if you go back to the older games, you know, every character can summon like a GF or like a mystical beast or whatnot. But with this game, it was just solely just Yuna. So it was very unique. So if anyone looking for a very fun RPG to like dive into, I definitely recommend this game. And those are the reasons why Final Fantasy X is my number 3. So my number 2 game is Resident Evil 4. Yes, Resident Evil 4. And I could say so much about this game, but I first want to start off by saying that this game is arguably the greatest survival horror video game of all time. And there are a few reasons why that has been the claim about this game. The first one being that this game has been released on 5 different generations of video game consoles. Think about it, right? Resident Evil 4 started off as an exclusive for the GameCube, and then it was ported over to the PS2, and some additional chapters were added, as well as new weapons and even new costumes for the characters. And then after that, it was remade in a sense, or I guess remastered, and put on the PS3 as a digital only copy in the US. From there, it was ported over to the PS4, and then as of last year, we ended up getting a full remake for the PS5. So I haven't seen anything like that in history, really, with the survival horror video game. And Resident Evil 4 is the game that has stood the test of times because it's been remastered and remade. So when it comes to this game, you play as Leon, and if you play Resident Evil 2, you know that Leon was on the Raccoon Police Department force as a law enforcement officer. But then by the 4th game, he's working underneath the president So in Resident Evil 4, the president's daughter gets kidnapped and taken to Europe, and she's held captive within this village community, who ends up being a cult, right? So she's taken captive by this like religious village cult, and it's your job to go in and rescue her. Not only that, but with Resident Evil, we were so used to zombies, you know, the T virus, the G virus, right? Like this biological virus that was developed in a lab for warfare, that would turn, you know, humans and animals into zombies, right? Well, in Resident Evil 4, we find out that people are becoming infected because of this parasite. So the series had moved away from like a virus that was developed in the lab to a parasite. I thought that was pretty interesting too. So a lot of the game is you, in a sense, facing off against, you know, this village of people and their leader, and rescuing the president's daughter. Another thing that's cool about Resident Evil 4 is that, you know, prior to this game, there was never such a thing game mechanic wise as over-the-shoulder aiming and shooting. Nothing like that had ever existed. But when Capcom developed Resident Evil 4, they made it to where, you know, for instance with Leon, you can aim the gun and even shoot it, and your perspective would be like behind his shoulder, right? So I thought that this was very brilliant. The fact that they created a brand new game mechanic that was eventually used in future action franchises like Gears of War and Uncharted, right? So this game was revolutionary because of that. And the last reason why it could be argued that this is the greatest survival video game of all time is just because of the blend of action and horror, right? There was a horror themed that overcasted an action theme. So it was more like a hybrid. So we had never seen that really with the Resident Evil games prior to Resident Evil 4. It was mainly survival horror themed. And as it progressed from 3 to 4 and made its way to 4, we kind of then incorporated more action and everything. But yeah, Resident Evil 4 is such a great game to play. I highly recommend it to anyone. And it's just fun being able to get weapons, being able to conserve your ammo, and go against this cult village and their leader. So that is the reason why Resident Evil 4 is my number 2 pick. Now, my number 1 PS2 video game, it goes to a game, but the game is split into 3 parts. You might be wondering what it is, but if you can't guess, just know that it is the Jak and Daxter franchise. Now I know what some of you may be saying, like, wait, these are 3 different games, it should be 1. Well, 1, this is my video, so I'm allowed to cheat and do what I want to do. But also number 2 is that in order to experience the full original storyline of Jak and Daxter, you have to play all 3 games. You know, you have to, right? You have to understand the origins of Jak and Daxter before you can honestly play Jak X Combat Racing and even you know, The Lost Frontier. You have to go back and play the original trilogy. So for me, you know, starting with the first game here, this game holds a special place in my heart. I mentioned in the first game hunting video that this is my first PS2 game. This is actually my original copy that I got years ago, like when I was in middle school. So I've always kept it with me. It was the red label version. And you know, I got this game just by chance. My older sister, whenever my siblings and I, whenever we got our PS2, my older sister went with my parents to pick up the PS2 and she bought the games, right? So she got Final Fantasy X for herself. She got Dragon Ball Z Budokai, the first one, from my younger sister. And then for me, she got Jak and Daxter. I had no idea what this series was about. I didn't even know if I was gonna like it until I opened up the game and my mind was blown. And if you're wondering why my mind was blown, it's because the manual is actually a full map. Like the manual unfolds to a full map and shows all the areas that you're gonna travel to during your journey, which I thought was really cool. And not only that, but if you fold it partially as well, you can see that there's a poster here as well too. So when I saw this as a kid, I was just completely intrigued. And I was like, wait a minute, you get to tell me that you get to go on this like grand adventure and go to all these places? And I thought that was really cool. Not only that, but the uncle of the protagonist in the game, Jack, right? His uncle gives him the map so that he can go out and explore the world and help him as well too on his adventure. So with the first Jack and Daxter game, what's cool about it is that it is a platformer where you're exploring the world, you're collecting precursor orbs, power cells, scout flies, you name it. Like every single area has all these items that you're collecting, and you're helping out different characters that you meet in the game by completing challenges and like what is termed today fetch quests. I don't kind of like to use that game because it just minimalizes the experience that you have completing these tasks for the different characters that you meet. But ultimately, what blew my mind about this game is that it was open world and there were no load times on this version. If you go back and play the Jack and Daxter game, this one on the PS2, you'll see that there are no load times, and I thought that was really genius that Naughty Dog was able to do that back then. The first game, another thing that was cool, the last thing that was cool was that, you know, there was a struggle between good versus evil, and in this game specifically, you were on a mission to stop a sinister couple from really harnessing and powering themselves with dark eco, and in a sense destroying the world. So when it came to dark eco, you never touched it. If you did, you instantly died in the game. But throughout the game, there are other colors of eco. There's green, yellow, blue, and red. And for each eco, there's like a master, right? Someone who has spent their life studying this particular eco, and they're called a sage. So at the beginning of the game, you meet the green sage because he's been studying eco for his entire life, right? Like he's an expert, a master for green eco. So yeah, I recommend this game for anyone to start off at the beginning of the franchise. Now, the second game right here is where, you know, things took a turn for the worse for Jack because he ended up being in prison for like a few years and experimented on with dark eco. So the second game pretty much picks up, I think, a couple years or so after the events of the first game, and Daxter finds Jack in prison, frees him, and this is the first time where we actually get to hear Jack. In the very first game, Jack was a mute, he did not speak at all. But in the second game, he actually talks for the first time, which was amazing to all of us fans. Not only that, but he was angry after being, you know, captured and experimented on for those 2 years or so. He was angry and wanted revenge. And another thing with Jack 2 is that we were introduced to Dark Jack, right? So having been experimented on for a few years, Jack was able to transform into Dark Jack, which uses dark eco. So remember I mentioned that in the first game, if you touched eco, you died? Well, in this game, it was the opposite. If you touched dark eco, you would absorb it, and once you got enough dark eco, you would transform into Dark Jack, and you had different abilities because of that. So Jack 2 picks up to where you're in this metropolis called Haven City, and Haven City is controlled by this dictator by the name of Baron Praxis. What was cool about Jack 2 is that it reminded me a lot of Grand Theft Auto on the PS2, like all the Grand Theft Auto games, because it was open world. You were able to take people's vehicles from them as much as you wanted to and go around completing missions and everything. But to make a long story short, Jack 2 is really about Jack coming into his own character and understanding that in order to take down what was considered a big threat in this game, he would have to align himself with others. So he ends up joining this resistance that goes against the Baron, and that's kind of how Jack 2 plays out. That's definitely Jack 2. I highly recommend it to anyone if they want to continue the series moving forward. And the third game in the series, Jack 3, this is a continuation of Jack 2, where after the events of Jack 2, Jack is actually banished from Haven City and he's deported to the Wasteland. And the Wasteland is like a desert metropolis, so to speak, right? Like with desert storms and marauders. It's just brutal, right? And a lot about Jack 3 is really a journey of self-discovery. You know, after what had happened in Haven City, Jack had to go on a journey to understand who he was or who he is based on his lineage and his ancestors. Like, where did he come from, his origins? Not only that, but throughout the entire Jak and Daxter franchise, there was always the question of like, who are the precursors? And you'll notice that theme a lot in the very first game. The precursors made all of this technology, advanced technology, that everyone in the current world in this game had used. So with Jak 3, you kind of get the answer, or you do get the answer for who the precursors are. I found that to be really cool. And last but not least, with Jak 3, we're introduced to Light Jak. So, Light Jak is, opposite of Dark Jak and has, his own abilities. But what's cool about Jak 3 is that you were able to become one or the other. So that just expanded Jak's abilities to where he could even fly. I can go on and on about the Jak and Daxter franchise, but those are a few reasons for why it is my #1 PS2 video game. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in to today's video to hear me share about my top 5 PS2 games. And in the comments down below, I want to know, what are your top 5 PS2 video games? Let's definitely chat it up for sure. And if you're up for it, definitely make a response video to this one and just share your thoughts. Either way, I'm gonna definitely respond to each and every comment. And if you do make a video, let me know. So I look forward to seeing you all within the next video. I'm out.